Hey, everybody. I'm not Chris Richter, by the way.
Hey, Bill.
Hey, Tyler, how are you?
I'm good, man. How about you?
Good.
Sweet.
I see Chris on here. Um,
You guys?
there you are. Hey, Chris, how are you?
Good. How you doing?
Good. Hey, I'm gonna make you the host because I think that's the only way I think I can figure out how to do this. That you can share your screen and stuff like that.
Okay.
So you should see hopefully a different bar where you can share your screen and stuff now. I don't know if it's the same or not. But.
Yeah, I think I got it there.
Okay, cool. And it should still be recording to my clouds, so that should be good.
Okay.
If we have some issue with the recording for some reason and it goes to your, I don't know, your like desktop or something, let me know. So I'll kick off the call. Let's just give them a couple more minutes. Chris, the other thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to use the chat between me and you. So if you click on the chat, I don't know how often do you use this system too?
Yeah, I've used it some.
Okay, if you click down on the chat, I'm just going to send you a couple things just before we get going while some people are jumping on.
Okay. Let's see. Okay.
Okay. All right. So let's see. All right. We got Peter, Ariane, Dan, Patrick. What's up, Patrick? James, and James. Danny. Hey, Danny. How are you? Tyler, you said hi. Tim Dye. We'll have people just jump on and off. Hey, Mike Simmons is on, the big dog. All right. We'll have people jump on and off. So it's just kind of talking to the group. If everybody can just stay muted, and if you have a question, throw it in the chat. I'll kind of I'll make sure that it gets answered, or we come back to it in another time. And then Chris, if you want to take like questions throughout or take a pause to ask questions or whatever, that's fine. If I see anything that I think maybe we should just kind of stop to talk about, I'll try to just jump in. So,
Okay.
and then towards the end, we can kind of unmute some people and they can ask questions or whatever. So I'll give you a quick introduction to Chris and his team. Chris, they're co-founders of Audantic. So Chris Richter is on the call with us. He's got a bachelor's in physics, a former engineer, worked with NASA. I don't know, JPL must be another company that I don't know. But 2 patents before the age of 23 is pretty impressive. I currently have 0 patents and I'm almost 40. He wholesaled houses for 10 years, all off-market stuff, a lot like we're doing. So he understands the language that we speak and the lingo and what we're trying to accomplish here. And not just a physics nerd or engineer nerd like myself. Always in love with finding the edge through data. So started data mining in 2006. So Chris and I have talked a couple times, and I think we have a lot of stuff in common. I really like to dig through the numbers. He's just at like a insanely higher level than me. It's clear every time we talk. So, and then his business partner, Franklin, has a BS in bachelor's in computer science and a master's in math. Former financial engineer, commonly known as Quant. So if you ever watch the show Billions, you might know what that is. High frequency trading firms use them to come up with like the algorithms and stuff like that to trade and make a 1/10 of a cent on everything. Data scientist at Facebook, patent in the area of AI that saved Facebook hundreds of millions in incremental revenue. So pretty impressive just between the 2 of them. And then they have a data team of 3 additional data scientists, 2 developers and a data engineer. So they manage and update 80 plus million homes, 300 plus million individuals, and 400 plus million recording events. So this is kind of the volume of what they're looking at to build out the stuff that he's going to talk about, and analyzing every investor, seller, and every month getting updates. So, and he put a quote in here. So this is our dream. We get real weird with it. So I think you're going to find in talking to him, he's really passionate about this, which I thought was pretty cool. And I'm really happy, Chris, that you agreed to come on this call from outside the group. I think this is the first time that we've really had someone on one of our calls from outside of what we're doing. So, and there's been a lot of conversations about what's going on with your list and what's different. So I thought bringing you on and having you talk to all the members about what really is different, what you guys are doing, kind of like peek behind the curtain is going to show a lot of people, the difference between kind of what we're doing and what I do, just pulling lists at random, trying to mail, and then what you guys do. So I'm excited to have you. I'm happy that you took some time to be with us. And this is Chris.
Okay. Thanks, Bill. Dude, like I'm super happy to be here. I'm really grateful for you guys having me. We end up talking to people from your group a lot, and so it's pretty awesome. I've known Andy for a long time, worked with him for a long time, and I've known Justin for a long time too. So, I'm really glad to be here. It's funny, like that stuff that you're talking about, like a lot of that stuff, like my background, that was like 20 years ago. I mean, we started this like looking at sewer lanes, like, and things like that. Like, I mean, I was doing the exact same thing all of you guys were. I was trying to get juicy deals. I was trying to find hoarder houses. I was trying to find, fat deals. And it just got more and more, we just like digging in. So can you guys see my screen, my PowerPoint?
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, it's not good. Like, you're going to see this PowerPoint and be like, wow, this guy's not a professional presenter. And that's true. But, it's probably better for our clients that I do the other instead of this. So do you guys?
I will warn you, it's kind of like talking to an inanimate object. Everybody just sits there and stares at you. So I've done a lot of these coaching calls where I'm like, okay. So if you ever need like a little reinforcement, just let me know and I'll jump in to help.
Oh, shoot, I'm making it bigger. That's not what I meant to do. All right, I'll just hop into this. How about that? So my name's Chris. I'm with Outdantic. It's a background on me. It's pretty straightforward. Like I said, not a professional presenter, so forgive me if these slides are, we're not done by a designer. They were done by me. My hope is that I can show you guys how to scale your deal volume without guessing. And I'm just going to really dig into that one point. So for what it's worth, this might get technical. I got this thing on on how to make good webinars, and I watched it, and it had all like this stuff on like how to make them through this and that, and I'm just going to talk about stuff I know about. There's not a lot of outside of that. I saw like the 14 different ways to close and all this, and it was neat. It's just not me, so I'm going to talk about this stuff. So you guys can hang out and watch, and hopefully it'll be useful. One thing that I'm going to show you in the end, it's not going to make sense right now, but this should make sense by the time that we're done here, is that this should be all of your goal. This should be everybody's goal. And what this is a calculator, really, that shows you if you have, 100 deals in your market, how much do you need how many targets do you need? How much mail do you need to send? How many people's names do you need in order to touch all those people? So if there's 100 deals every month, how many people do you need to send out every month to touch all those? You need to know that in advance, because this is the future for what it's worth. Like, now that things change, and now that this is available, like if you don't know how much you need to send out every month, whether it be mail or phones or anything, if you don't know how many targets you need to touch to at least get in front of every deal, and someone else does, you don't want to be in that spot, because you won't be there for very long. That's my overriding theme here, and hopefully I can convince you of that. So I think that our goal for you guys is to just stop guessing and start scoring. So there's that saying, I think this is an old business book, and you guys read that old business book, Who Moved My Cheese? It says, if you do not change, you will become extinct. And data and analytics, at least here, this isn't something, I think it's newer for the broader audience, but for the funds, the REITs, and for guys here in my area, like I started this because other people were doing it. I wasn't alone. Like, other people had, were using statisticians. Other people had in-house data and analytics teams. And in a lot of competitive areas, that's, if you're in a high-price competitive market, this is probably not new to you. And so I want to walk through why it's important. This is me. This is my family. Bill already told you about my background, so I'm not going to hop a whole lot into it. But I did flip for 10 years. I started in like 2005. I flipped a lot of houses. I've been in a lot of hoarder houses. I used to go around with the crowbar in my trunk and the mask, because I'd go in the houses that had so much cat urine that you'd want to vomit when you walked inside. And they were juicy deals. They were fatties, and I wanted to know how to get more of them. That was always my goal. Like, how do I find this and focus on what's good? And so I started going through and really digging. This is my partner, Franklin. For what it's worth, I'm not actually that technical. I'm probably more technical than your average citizen, but Franklin is actually really into it. This guy's been, programming since he was, like 14 years old. So we're like 20 years. And he's, was a data scientist. He was a quant, and he's really, really into that. And so, we kind of come together in that way, and we have a whole team that supports us. Going back to where I started, I talk to people sometimes and they're like, oh, I'm already kind of doing what you're doing. And so, they're probably doing what we were doing in like 2007. Is most of the time when I start talking to them, that's really what was going on. So, back in 2007, we would scrape the county. We had hired some folks to scrape the county. We'd scrape the tax, the recorders, probably the same as like what you guys do, where you just pull every parcel, you pull all the recorder's history, and then you go through and you join it up against, you do like a deceased suppression, you flag them for deceased, you'll do like a vacancy, you'll do a tax delinquent, you'll pull the, we pull the sewer liens. I always joke that like, I love the sewer liens, right? Because if somebody's not paying to flush their toilet, like we should talk. Like, we should have a conversation. Like, because I might want to make an offer on your house. Like if it was always just such a sexy list, right? But we'd go through and do all this, and then we'd build our own little pivot tables and stuff like that. And we were doing that, like 2007-ish, and it just kind of carried forward. By 2011, it had kind of advanced, and I was doing more technical database work, I guess, and doing these things in a better way. And I started doing work for friends in like 2014. So this business kind of started because, I was already doing it at home. My one guy was outperforming my largest competitor like 12-1. And they were way bigger than us because we just had better information. We just had way better information. So I'm going to, like I said, I'm not too used to this. So, oh, you want me to press this, Bill? Present button. You guys want me to press the present button? Alt S? Let's see. Is that better, guys?
Yeah, that looks good.
Looks great.
Now we can't see your next few slides, so they have to pay attention to that.
Yeah, well, I was giving you something to look forward to. It's all right. So, I started doing some work for friends, and let's see. Today, we work with about, so for what it's worth, like this was my dream. I always wanted a national database. Like some people want cars, some people want helicopters. I always wanted a national database of tax recorders and then demographics. And it wasn't until like 2014 that I actually got that. But now we have 80 million single family homes plus. We manage 400 million recording events and about 300 million people's information. So what that actually looks like is that, we have tax. So that's like all the year built, the value, square footage, condition, whether it's owner occ, non-owner occ, how long you've had it. Then we have all the recorders information. So we have like the sales history. Was it quit claimed? How did they get it? What was the D type? how long have they had that loan, all that kind of stuff, prior deed types, sales, chains of title, all that kind of stuff. And then we have the buyer information. So when somebody purchases, like we're looking at the buyer. So the other stuff I think is pretty normal, except for the history of it. But the buyer information is really valuable, right? Because, and I'm going to talk about this later, but we handicap all the buyers. We look at every single sale in the country every month, and we look at everybody that's flipping, everybody that's buying as an investor, and we give them a score. Like if you guys are flipping stuff, I promise we're handicapping all of you. We're looking to see how good are you at your job in your market compared to, the next guy. And so, it really gives us a good idea of what are good deals and who's just out there making mistakes. And that's going to come up later. I'll show you why. But as much as anything else, we're looking at the sellers. Because when you look at a property and a sale, right, there's three things, right? There's the property, there's the seller, and there's the buyer. And all those things kind of feed together to say, was this a good deal? And so we're looking at the sellers, who's actually selling to investors versus who's actually selling to everybody else. If you don't have all of the information, and again, I'll touch on that, but if you're not looking at all of them, you're kind of looking at nothing. But you can we're looking at the sellers, their ages, their incomes, their financial style, what do they drive, what do they buy, what do they eat? Do they go to IHOP or do they go to the fancy restaurant? Who are they? Their spending habits, all that. So, today we're in about 250 counties. It's way more than that. But anyway, we got into all that just through referral. All of our businesses come from referral today. And it works really well most of the time. I'm not here to tell you this works really well all the time. We've certainly gone places where we've broken things. We've written checks because we can see when it's us and when it's the operator. And there have been plenty of times when it was us. And I can think of a couple of markets very specifically that are troublesome markets. St. Louis. Phoenix is hard, but Phoenix is actually just competitive. But Baltimore, it's complex. But most of the time, we have like 85+% retention. It works really well. So it does break, and I'm going to talk about why later, because it's really important to understand when data breaks and how it breaks. And I stole this from Gates because I think it's so meaningful, but he says, the first rule of any technology used in a business is that automation applied to an efficient operation will magnify the efficiency. The second is that automation applied to an inefficient operation will magnify the inefficiency. And that's a super powerful thing to think about, because when you look at like when it breaks, like if you're looking at data and making assumptions that are, that don't have all the information, it can totally mislead you, and you can have a lot of confidence about being misled. That's scary. So again, the goal for you guys is to stop teeing off without looking for the pin. I'll talk about what I mean there. Let's see, there's more chat. Yeah, right. San Antonio, well, I'll tell you what, so let's talk about that. San Antonio and all of Texas had been an issue for years. And I'm going to show you why in a few slides. We actually flew down there because it was just presenting problems. And quite frankly, it was working for some people and not for others. And so we literally flew down there in August and met with a bunch of people and went around and looked at stuff. And Texas is working really well. But it did not for a long time, for years. And so, that's something it's more important to look at what doesn't work than what does. And I talk to people about that a lot because, 9 out of 10 times we have a great reputation. If people say, oh, this works and this, you should do this. You learn a lot more from looking at where things break than when they're working. So, So want to stop teeing off without looking at the pen. And what I mean is, and this is going to seem like, I want to bring up, this is an illustration, not an exaggeration. When you're using a traditional list, you're kind of teeing off blindfolded. The crowd's telling you which way to aim, and you kind of spin around, and you're like, oh, they're like, oh, go that way, go this way. and you're taking your best guess based on what somebody else said in their market works. Not all markets are the same. You know, I remember watching a webinar back in like 2012, and this guy's like, oh, I hit 12 HUD homes, and you could do 12 HUD homes a year. Dude, that would never work in Seattle. Never. Wouldn't happen. Not all markets operate the same. They don't all work the same. You have to look at each one. You know, there are markets that are similar to one another, but you know, you're not going to come to Seattle and crush HUD homes. I'll tell you that. You're not going to do it in San Francisco. So, you know, they all have to be looked at. And so we have to be careful about this. You know, when you're doing predictive targeting, you're actually looking, you're studying what you're doing, you're looking at the play, you're looking at what's going on and giving it a good look. So let's talk about traditional lists versus predictive. I want to see something. I was going to run through, I'm not going to, but I was going to run through, and if any of you guys want to just see a separate video on how predictive targeting actually works, I'm going to send it out. Right now I'm going to focus on the difference between traditional and predictive, but Bill, I can send you a video that we have about how predictive targeting actually works. It's longer, it's probably like 10 minutes, so I'm not going to run through it, but
yeah, that works. I can post it in the group so they can see after when we post this video too.
Okay. So a traditional list is basically built on filtering, right? And this is what we all did. Like, for what it's worth, I'm not saying that filtering doesn't work. So don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that what you're doing doesn't work. I mean, there's a lot to be said for actually just having industry experience and understanding what your experience is in the market. But a traditional list is built on filtering. This is what we all did for a long time. I think that most of us, if not all of us, started out like going to listsource, and it still works. I'm not saying it doesn't. But we go and we say, okay, give me this equity, give me this your build, give me a unknown equity, give me some tax delinquents, and I'm going to pull everybody that did this where. So I did that for a long time. I think the question is that are we asking the right questions? So when you look at equity, for example, I think most people throw a threshold on equity and they say, give me 50 to 100% equity, give me the unknowns, whatever. When you're doing that, I think very few people actually ask what equity means. It's typically an unamortized loan amount, an estimated value divided by an unamortized loan amount, or vice versa. Am I flipping those? But let me tell you something. If you're getting your data from CoreLogic, which is where listsource and REI source and all that stuff, you have an unamortized loan amount divided by an estimate. Both of those things are wrong. And if either of them are wrong by 5-10%, that boundary is pretty blurry. So again, it works in general, but there's issues with filtering, and one of the issues with filtering, one of the main issues, is that it's not taking information into account, right? It's based on a narrative bias. Predictive targeting is actually going through in the process of giving every house a score based on looking at every house in the county and every sale. Very different thing. So I kind of did the old, I think this is Benjamin Franklin. Anybody like where you do the split? Is that the Benjamin Franklin thing? I don't know. He's old. Like dead. It's almost Halloween. Not sure why that's relevant. Traditional list building versus predictive modeling traditional list is it's narrative guessing. It just is, guys. It's like you're guessing, and predictive targeting is actually modeling. So what do I mean? Well, I found this quote from Warren Buffett, and I don't say this to you. I say this because it's always been relevant to me. And risk comes from not knowing what you're doing. And so, we're a science house. Everybody here, our whole team, with the exception of, a couple of the guys that are more on like the sales side, like everybody here is scientists. So we're constantly questioning our own assumptions. It's why you don't get this huge, like we don't come off, we don't come out in a guru format, because like, in order to do that, you have to have an enormous amount of like, confidence in things that you believe you understand. Like we're constantly like questioning it, but risk comes from not knowing what you're doing. And so when you're doing, when you're building a list and you're using filtering, the challenge with that is this, And again, I'm not saying it doesn't work, because it does, obviously. You guys are all here. I know people that just use lists that make really good money. Probably a lot of people on this call. The challenge with it is this, is that you're not using historical data. So when I say that, some people will say, well, I use my own data. I look at my own targets. Well, that's kind of like looking at your own shoes and deciding that you got the biggest feet in the universe. You know, if you're not looking at everybody, if you're not looking at all the transactions, it's kind of circular. So, you know, if you're not using historical data, so I mean, like, if you're not looking at the past sales, and when you're looking at the past sales, do you know who the sellers were? And when I say that, do you know how much they made, how old they were, how that compares to the rest of the universe? Because if you don't know, I use this as an example all the time. You know, people will say, oh, well, my audience is over 65. And then, you know, you'll find out that they're mailing a retirement community. Well, sure they are, you know? So, you know, do you know who the sellers were? Are you looking at who the buyers were, right? And I'm going to get into this again, like I'm really going to go on a tear about this in a minute, but you know, if you're not looking at who the buyers were of all these transactions, you just don't have a lot of historical data to make a decision on. So you end up getting misled by like a survivorship bias or something like that. You're also looking at a partial data set. We call this like, you know, so you're looking at tax and recorders, maybe you're looking at some demographics too. Maybe you're, you know, enriching and doing that stuff historically and storing that. But you're also looking at just a part of the population. So if you have 300,000 houses and, you know, you cut with filters down to 50,000 or 20,000, you're kind of walking around like this, you know, like you're like, hey, zombie time. Again, it's almost Halloween. I love Halloween. But you don't want to be walking around like it's Halloween time. You know, you're looking at, it's such a small sample. I know because I did it, right? And when you're doing the filtering, you're doing what we call a naive cut or blind cut, which means that you're guessing it where you should stop. And what's interesting about this whole thing is that when you're using filtering, what are you doing, right? You're going through and you're saying, I'm gonna reduce this until it meets my cost. That's backwards thinking. Like, you shouldn't say, this is what I'm gonna reduce this to my budget. You should say, I need to make my budget what it is required to get this many deals. You know, somebody said to me, like, and I really, and I didn't always think like this, by the way. You know, when I was out, like, you know, even up until pretty close to the end of, you know, my transacting, I would only mail stuff that I thought was super juicy. And I wasn't looking around to see, you know, how many deals everybody was doing. And so somebody said to me, I'll tell you what, Todd Toback said to me, and he said to a bunch of us, because he was saying he did all this volume. And I thought, that's crazy. Like, you're nuts. Like, why would you do that kind of volume, right? I was like, that's risky. And he said something that just struck me so powerful. It just hit me right in the chest. And he's like, look, man, you know what's risky? He's like, I do 10 deals a month, right? I spend a lot to get them, but I do 10 deals a month. So if I don't do 10 deals, I only do 8 deals, no big deal. I still make 100 grand. He said, you know, if you're only doing 2 deals a month and you don't do your 2 deals, you're broke and you're out of the game. And I completely flopped, you know, my philosophy never really struck me like that. I thought it was a really powerful thing, and it stuck with me. So when you're doing modeling, what you're doing is that we're looking at all of the historical data. So we have years of sales information, right? So we have, going back years, we know for years who all those sellers were, who all those buyers were. You know, is this buyer that's coming in just somebody from, you know, out of the country parking money here? We have what's called full spectrum data. So when I say full spectrum data, what I mean is it's different than a blind cut. A full spectrum data set means that we're looking at, you know, I think a lot of people think that we make lists. We don't make lists. We go buy lists just like you do. People pay us to do statistics. They don't pay us for a list. Our list is every house in the country. It's a list we buy. You can buy it too. It's for sale. It's commodity. You know, I say all the time, like, anybody can buy grapes. That doesn't mean you're good at making wine. You know, the list is for sale. You know, but we're looking at every house, every seller, every buyer. And in order to have a good probability, you need to do that. Because at the end of the day, I think that what we're all trying to accomplish, even with the filtering, is that you're not really trying to, you know, use filters, what you're really trying to do is score the properties and go after the highest and best. The real way to do that, and the way that's done and will be done in the future, by the way, as this industry becomes more efficient, as you're seeing that it is, and margins get compressed, and larger operators scale and take over because they can, because of data, things are going to lean into scoring, and that's just what's going on. So, we score every single house. That way you can scale safely. Now, with a traditional list, you're not doing any kind of segmentation. Keep an eye, like, if any of this is like, if you guys have questions, you can pop them into, like, I'll stop after each one of these, and if you guys have questions or comments, you want to tell me I'm crazy, not necessarily going to disagree, but, when you're doing it in a traditional list, you're not doing any kind of segmentation. We're doing a full segmentation. So what do I mean by that, right? Well, if you're not segmenting the buyers, I think most of us have gone through and we throw up like heat map, kind of like this one, right? It'd be like, oh, here's this heat map. Here's where my buyers are. What does that mean? What does that mean? Like, if you're just looking at non-owner occ properties or people that are buying into an LLC, pretty broad, dude. And it's going to be, your stuff's going to be diluted by volume. I don't know if you guys ever heard the joke about the statistician that drowned in a lake that had an average depth of 3 feet, but averages are a way to hide information. Just FYI. If you're looking at a place that has an average of 3 feet, you could have most of you 1 foot, and then this part's 15 feet, right? How does that even apply? What am I even talking about? Well, let's look at Phoenix, Arizona. Or quite frankly, let's go back to Texas. But let's start in Phoenix. What percentage of the population of all the solds that are, if you're just saying, I'm just looking at LLCs, how much of that is open door? A lot, guys. It's like 10 times the traditional flipper. Open door, offer pads, Zillow, Redfin, all these iBuyers. They make up a huge percentage. So if you're looking at an average, guess what? Those guys aren't even going after the same product you are. They're doing a totally different thing. But if what you look at is 100 deals and 90 of them are done by those guys, and you try to do your targeting on that, your scope is so far off and you don't even know it. So you have to segment those buyers. You have to go through and actually, categorize these guys, right? So when we go through and we're categorizing stuff, we're saying, okay, we're going to look at the guys that are doing fix and flip. We're going to look at the guys that are doing buy and hold, the institutions, new investors. When I say new investors, we're looking at how many deals they've actually done. Obviously, you want to see how many, like, is this guy like somebody that's bought one deal and he just got turned and burned by a wholesaler? Or is this person a turnkey buyer, or are they an iBuyer? Because if you want to know which deals are good, you certainly have to segment these guys out, because I want what, I'm in Mud's buying. I don't want what Open Door's buying. It's the same in Texas. If you're looking at Texas, you have this massive movement of these new volume wholesalers. So you got, like the New Westerns and Networks, these guys, like, you have to say, am I picking up product from these guys? And if so, what type? Am I picking up a turnkey product? Am I going after a turnkey product? Because if all of these guys have different strike prices because they have different yields, they have different goals, if you're not segmenting these out, you're going to be you're calibrating your scope way off. If you wonder how I know that, it's because I did it. We broke stuff down there. And in other places too, in Phoenix, like it took a while to pick that up and to understand this. And so, we had to go through and build tools to deal with all this. Internally, we have to go through and build tools to audit every single transaction. And, it's not rule-based. We're not going through, we're actually looking at this stuff. And so, it takes a big team to do that. But if you're not segmenting, your targeting is going to be off. So that's another difference. With a traditional list, you're not doing any back testing. So there's no testing in general. And, we're doing back testing. So here we go. Besides buyer categories, what do you define as a target transaction volume defined? So I'll read this out loud. This is a great question. Jeff Robertson. It says, besides buyer categories, what do you do to define target transactions when you're modeling to find? What criteria are you using to define the goal? That's an awesome question. It's a super meaningful question. And for what it's worth, I don't know how many of you guys have worked with or talked to. We work with everybody individually. So when we work with a client, we're not pumping out data sets. It's part of the reason we can't work with 1 million people. We don't have a product where you can just come online and buy our stuff, because if you came and said, this is what I want, we're literally going to go in and define our targeting around your needs. So you're going to tell us you're going to give us parameters for what you want. You're going to say, I'm a turnkey guy, I'm a fix and flip guy, I'm an institutional guy. This is the product that we want. This is what we're looking at. And the targeting is going to be defined by the user. We build every single list that we've ever put out has been custom built for that person. We still do that. And it's not fast, by the way. Like, you can't just come to us and say, hey, send me your list tomorrow. We go through, we build them all independently. We test them all before we send them over. And, we follow up too, because, sometimes it doesn't work the first time. I'm not here to be like, oh, this is like, it's a process, man. But like I said, we have, greater than 85% retention rate.
So Chris, if it's wholesalers that are coming to you saying this is, so then do you back out from there? Hey, who are your biggest buyers? What is the typical product that you moved over the past year?
Yeah, exactly.
What does that look like? Okay. Yeah.
So at the end of the day, we're saying, let's look at all the transactions that happened and which of these were something that you want. Was this a good deal? And I'll give you an example. Like, we've seen a fund, a newer fund, move into Florida and then into Phoenix. They might be in like Pinal and stuff down there too. But anyway, we've seen them move in, and they're picking up stuff, and they just sneak through into the set, right? And so if you're not looking at it all the time, these guys will sneak into your sets and they'll take up massive volume, and all of a sudden, you're looking and saying, well, 90% of the deals are coming from here, but it's one dude or it's one fund. And so, yeah, like you have to look at all of them and say, is this person something that you even want? Are they playing the same game as you?
So does it help then if you have bigger people that have actual, like, these are the last 200 or 300 houses that we've done in the past year or two, to give you? Will you take that stuff from like the wholesaler, or is that?
Yeah, totally. Like if they're wholesaling and they're not going on title, yeah, definitely. If they're going on title, we see them anyway.
Okay.
And so, yeah, it's definitely helpful if they're wholesaling and everything they have is not on, not on title. Yeah, it's helpful. And it's also helpful just to say who are your competitors, like, the guys that are doing the volume stuff that are like going on and turning like same day, like we see all of it, right? I mean, they held it for 24 hours. They do the same day. It's double close. It's obvious. But if not, then yeah, it's everything is individual, and so like this is such a meaningful question because it's the real question that you should be asking. Is like go to the core and say at the very bottom, at the very like base, what are we trying to do? What's the real question? And it's similar to like when we think about equity. I think a lot of people use equity as a filter. I certainly did. You should. But the question that you should be asking is like, what is equity? What does that mean? You hear that a lot here. Like, even when we're talking inside the company, people will make comments and it's like, what does that mean? I don't know what you're talking about. What does that mean? And so, Bill, do you have a baby right there? That's awesome, dude. Yeah, he's drilling.
I'm trying to mute and unmute. Yeah, he just woke up from his nap, and his mom has abandoned me for an hour. So she'll be back in 10 or 15 minutes. I was hoping to weasel through it without him waking up, but
we'll get him indoctrinated in data.
Yeah, I'm watching. So this is like the future of wholesaling in the U.S. So watch out.
Yeah. So I put this comic up because I think it's hilarious, but it's this little guy. He's like, I've heard a lot of rhetoric from both sides. It's time to do my own research and find the truth. And he searches something on Google and it says literally the first link that agrees with what you believe. He's like, yeah, jackpot. And I think that's what we do a lot of times with our own lists is that, I'll hear somebody say, well, I bought this list, and it was a, I don't know, it was 65 and older, and it crushed. And let me tell you something, like, age is not statistically significant. Not. And so it's not that you shouldn't, and again, like, it's not that you shouldn't do these things, but, you know, if you can cut out half of those people because they make $300,000 a year, you should. And I think that that's a lot of what we do is actually reduction. I think that people are constantly looking for like a special set or something. We don't do that. Like, everybody has the same information, but you know, it's about removing stuff that is people that are never going to sell to you. So as far as the testing, you know, most folks aren't doing any kind of testing. So in order to look back and have some meaningful information, you'd want to say, okay, here's the list that I mailed to, you know, out of all the stuff that I mailed to, you know, who actually sold last month. And by the way, to do that, just for starters, you need to not dedupe all of your sets. Because if somebody, you know, if Sally Mae owns 3 properties and one of them sells, but you've deduped and you only have one of those property addresses on yours, you're going to miss it. I know it's obvious, but you know, if you're deduping, you're going to have a hard time back testing. And
that's that remove duplicates button in the source. So in case you guys, that's short for removing duplicates. So.
Yeah.
Can you repeat that one more time? Sorry.
If you're going to test to see what happened over the last month, you need to, every month you need to be buying everything that's sold. And then you need to be crossing that against your list. So you'd take all of your lists and you'd want to join it together with what's sold, but you would want to make sure that when you looked at what sold, you know, if Sally Mae owned 3 properties and she sold 1, let's say that Sally Mae owns 3 properties, right? And on your mailing list, you mailed Sally Mae, but you mailed her about 432 Lager Street, but what she sold was 123 Main. You need to have the undeduped data set in order to understand that you did mail her, but it wasn't the property that she sold that you mailed her about. And that way you know that you're still doing your targeting correctly. And if you're only looking at your own set, it's kind of like circular logic. It's kind of like if you're only looking at your own stuff and saying, well, this is what we mailed, this is what we got, this was our result. It's kind of like looking at your own shoes and deciding you have the biggest feet in the universe. Because you need to see what everybody else is doing. You need to see what you missed, which is far more important. Well, no, it's not, but you need to see what you missed in order to look at that. So with modeling, you know, what we're doing is that we're doing back testing. So, you know, we build out our predictions. We say, this is what we predict will happen. We test it, and then we see if it did happen, right? And by the way, this happens before you ever see a set. Like before anybody ever sees their own data set, you know, we're saying, okay, if we went back to January and we made all these predictions about what would happen, how much of it would have we been right? And we continue to test it until we're capturing, you know, the most we possibly can. And so, you know, you want to test to see how you did. So the question, it says, this is Jeff, if we start with the traditional equity list and then refined only to yours, how many names would we actually mail as a percentage of the total equity? What percentage would typically be removed as not quality? Again, super meaningful question. Like, you know, I have no way to answer that because it's going to vary. Every place is going to be different. Like every single market will be different. You know, if you want me to give you a broad answer and say, if you started with just everybody with equity and refined, I would cut out 80% of those people. 80% might be broad, but like, you know, far more than half. And by the way,
are you going to talk about that later, Chris?
Yeah.
About kind of the difference between like you're not overlaying a list, you're actually sending the most likely to sell type mailing list, or this question.
So I guess
like, are we taking your filters and putting them on our list or something? So.
Yeah, so and that's kind of, I talk about that in the predictive modeling, but we don't use filters. Like we use your filters. If you say that I don't want any property over 500,000, you know, it's, you know, we're not using filtering. Every single property gets a score. And one way to think about it is if you have, if you're using filtering, you're saying, okay, if it's red, I want it. If it's red and blue, I want it. What we're doing is that we take, every single property and we're looking at the combination of those two colors. Everything is actually a combination. So as an example, if you said, okay, I don't want anybody in my list that's under 65. Well, what are you cutting out doing that? Because it's really a question of how likely are they to sell, right? That's what we're trying to do. So if somebody's 45 and they just inherited a property and they live in mom's basement and they have a crack problem, you probably do want to talk to them, right? And so, but you would rule that person out if you used a filter. In the same way, you'd say, I want to talk to everybody over 65. Well, if they're over 65 and they make $300,000 a year and they're in great shape, they're not going to sell to you. And so what you really want is a score. And so, our list isn't a set of filters. It's not progressive filtering like, we used to do 10 years ago. It's a probability. And every single house in the entire region gets a probability. It gets a score. And then you just look at how much you have to do. And I'll share with you that in a sec here. Dude, I wish I could tell you who smokes crack. So, Randall asked who smokes crack. That was it. You know what? If I knew who smoked cat and who liked to collect cats, like we would all be in pretty good shape, right? Like if we could tell, like who, if you could walk by their house and just smell it from the street, if I knew who had a shoebox full of needles in their basement. I was in a basement one time. I was walking through and I see this shoebox full of needles. Scary house. And I looked at it and I said, oh, that's interesting. And the guy was like, yeah, man, like, come on, these guys, like, I don't know, I think he's got diabetes. And I was like, yeah, I don't think so, man. I don't think that's what that is. So that kind of brings us around to this. So again, like, this is what you want. You don't want to know how much you can get down to your budget. This is something, guys, like we never shown this. This actually was shown to me for the first time last week because this tool did not exist. I think that it existed for institutions. It's never existed publicly. This is something that you guys are actually the first to see it. Like I literally saw this on Friday afternoon, but I put it in here. It's a calculator. And it says, here's how many targets you're going to hit. Here's how much mail you have to send. And you can literally calculate with a probability how much mail or how many targets, whether it's phone calls, emails, whatever you want to do, how many targets you need to talk to capture a certain amount. So think about the implications of this. If somebody knows how much they have to do to hit all of the targets, who's going to win? Because now it's actually just an operations game, 100%. This is going to change how things work. It's already changing how things work. If you guys haven't seen the iBuyers coming, they all have their own team of data scientists. But if you don't have this calculator, you're going to have a hard time competing with people that do.
Am I assuming that you're creating this for each client separately? Like this is what you guys are doing? Or
Yep.
Okay. So each market has a different one like this. So
Yeah.
I know that if I want to hit, even if I want to hit 99%, I might only need to mail like 33,000. It doesn't make sense to mail 40.
Yeah.
So like how much more is it going to cost me to mail that much more versus how many targets am I going to hit up to 100%?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So this is still, for what it's worth, like I said, this is in beta. So don't expect to see this like on Tuesday or something, but like this is real.
I can wait till Wednesday.
Yeah.
How do you define that percentage of targets? What does that mean?
So like, let's say that there were 100 transactions last month. This is how many this is how many people you'd have to contact to collect all of them. And this is off a bit, but. Does that make sense, Will?
Not really. Like when you say 100 transactions last month, what transactions are you referring to?
Well, whichever ones were the targets. So let's say that we got on with you. You're in San Francisco, right?
San Diego.
San Diego. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right. So you're in San Diego. Let's say that we look and say, okay, let's say that there were 100 properties that you looked at and you said, okay, I would have done every one of these deals. Every one of these is something that I want. We would look at those and say, okay, these are the targets. Here's how much you would have had to done to touch all those.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
And that's saying how many names on your, like with your scoring on that list that we would need to mail. Is that right? So
correct.
What you sent us, if we're at 25,000 names, if we mailed that many, we would hit like 92% or something.
Correct. And again, like this is beta, so like you're definitely not going to see this week, but it is the same thing that we're doing essentially. So
isn't this kind of a lag though, since it's past data and stuff? But I guess that's what you're using to predict future results, right? And you kind of
I mean that's what you want to use, right?
Yeah, you have to. But it's more current than anything else that you might be looking at years down the road.
Yeah, and there's a probability associated with it. So it's like we're 80% likely that we're 90% likely. So Paul had asked if we're
They're like a statistical joke.
Yeah. That's the second one, I think. Paul had asked if we're using machine learning in the process, and it's a supervised with labels creating from patterns. Yeah, that's exactly right, dude. We are a machine learning company. All of our guys, 80% of our team is just purely working in machine learning, and it's supervised. We've done some unsupervised. It depends. Like some of the stuff is unsupervised too, but this part is supervised. Yes, that's a good question.
Hey, Chris, I got one more question. So this is pertaining to like real life applications since I just got your list. So I've been mailing out about 22,000 before in the equity list. And we were on a third drop, basically. We're going on a third drop. And I was planning on to go all the way to probably 6th, 7th drop on my first list. What do you recommend? Do we continue to just mail out on my equity list plus your list, or what's your recommendation?
That's totally up to you. I try not to tell people not to mail other lists, and here's why. I don't want to pretend that our stuff is perfect. I don't want to be like, oh, stop doing all of your other stuff, because that would be ridiculous. Like our stuff is definitely not perfect. It comes to the probability. I don't think that it's we have your list and we reduced it based on a score. And so we have every house in the county. We look at equity. A lot of those folks, the reason that they're getting removed because they're never going to sell to you. There are a ton of people out there that have equity or don't have any prior recording date, like the unknown folks, the unknown equity, that are just never going to sell to an investor. There are people that are gray, of course, and so they might get in there. But there are certain people that I can tell you from 2,000 miles away, they're never going to sell to you, at least not now.
Okay.
Now with the specialty sets, I always make an exception for that. So something like a code bio, something like sewer lien, probate, those lists are so small that you should just blast them. Like I don't ever want to be responsible for you guys missing some big fat deal that was a code bio or something because it didn't get flagged. Like, those lists are very small, they're very cheap. And, even if they convert it, even if you're only sending out 100 pieces, but you get one deal, you're getting 1%, but that's rad. Like you should do that. I never tell people not to do that. With the equity stuff, yeah, a lot of that you just don't need to mail.
Okay. So we are in the process of actually just getting rid of what's on your list that's on our equity list. So we're not sending, double.
Yeah.
Saving some money there. So, okay.
Yeah. So I guess the question is, I think for most people that we work with, we're super expensive on the front end. We're saving tons of money on the back. And I think expensive is all relative, right? I think it's actually, you're going to get, I think reality is an invoice everybody one way or another. I actually think it's far more expensive. I know that it's far more expensive not to know. You can actually establish that. But, the cost, I think, to build for most folks, like if you wanted to go do this, whoever's asking about like the supervised stuff, like, if you want to go build this, you can. Like anybody can go do this stuff, right? You can go get some tax data. You're going to pay, I don't know, whatever, 2 cents. Let's say you get it for 2 cents. That's a pretty decent price. And I'm sure you can get it for that. The recorders, the demographic stuff is way more expensive. You're probably not going to get it for 10 cents, but you might. If you're buying huge amounts, you get your historical sets. You're going to pay more for the history. You'd set up your hosting and your servers and all that. You get yourself an analyst. You'd want a data engineer, of course. You'd want a data scientist. You'd probably just want like a regular traditional full stack engineer too. And you could do it. It'd be like $500,000 a year. It's funny because like people are like, well, I just do this. This is how much it would actually probably cost you on the low end. I'm being very generous here on the low end to do this. And then there's the time. So, this is kind of what we do. I chose to do this just because I love it so much. I really always enjoy the data way more than going out and dealing with title and people that don't want to show up to closing and crazy people. So, we do it for people today. We worked with a lot of folks in the group, I think. And so, we're more than happy to help anybody out. We can talk to you about it. You can call us and talk to us about it. Doesn't mean that you're obligated to do anything. We just like to talk about data. So, I made a deal with Bill. So, Bill, if you want to cover that, you can.
Yeah, do you want to answer some questions first? I'm sure some people have some questions about and I have one. But I'll kind of let everybody else, if you got some questions,
Okay.
Come in or unmute yourself. Do you have some more stuff after this or
No, this is really what I had. Yeah.
Okay. So if you guys want to raise your hand and stuff like that, because I'm sure there's going to be some questions about
I see. Jeff had a funny question. Do we have any exotic data sets? So we have some stuff. We don't have anything that's productional or that is production. We have some stuff that we look at for sure. We still look at. I collect cerulines. We're not even using them in what we do. But I personally collect cerulines and code bios still, and those are really neat. Of course we have we have double parcels. So we see if somebody has a historic double parcel. That's actually included in our stuff. We have tax, of course. We have vacancy, of course. We have a lot of flags just about individuals. When I think exotic, I think things like the drug stuff, obviously. There's stuff that you're not actually allowed to use, right? So you can model things that you're not allowed to just use as a filter. So as an example, diabetes, dementia, things that, deceased, you can do a disease suppression, but you can't actually just market to dead people. You could probably, I know that you can buy, because I bought it, alcohol consumption, stuff like that, tobacco consumption, gambling. I've gotten a couple amazing deals from people that have gambling problems. Sounds horrible. But it's, you can buy that stuff. A lot of it we don't use because it's spotty. It's the same with a lot of the stuff that comes from the superior courts, the probate, eviction stuff. Those are all good sets and you should use them. It's hard to get that stuff in a really consistent way nationally. So that's why. Do you give that feedback to your clients? Hey, these are the things that we don't include and what we would recommend it, or if they have a conversation with you, you'll list those things out? Yeah, just in general, we just tell people if it comes from the superior court, we don't have it. So,
okay.
Cambridge Analytica. No, we don't have Cambridge. Let's see. Rod asked if we could share some of the results from the clients have experienced to compare against how they're doing with the list source. I didn't put together a testimonial sheet. To be honest, this sounds, whatever, but the testimonials would go on for 30 minutes. Andy's used this for years. Mike uses this. we'll just started, but if you go to our website, there's video testimonials. If you want a sheet of testimonials, I could send you one.
Yeah, my recommendation for you guys is just kind of ask around the group, and then some of those guys, or just contact Chris and talk to him. Maybe he'll put you in touch or show you the website. I mean, I think I don't think it's really fair to ask like how much they were doing before the source. Like ask some people that have used it and switched over. Like I know that Mike's really happy with it, and things like that. So
Dan Cohen said he started 3 weeks ago and have 4 deals under contract.
There we go. Live.
I'm not quite as vocal as Mike, but I've been using them for about a quarter, almost 2 quarters. It's saved us a ton of money. We're mailing way less, and we're getting the same amount of deals. So definitely worth it.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's kind of.
That was a goal. That's North Carolina right there. That's what happens. Yeah. So Brandon had asked about if it's 1 person per county. That's changed actually. So we've moved away from an exclusive format in some places in the bigger metros. It used to be we do like these really exclusive regions, and we've moved away from that. And so some places we're just like James had asked about capacity. Some places we do have capacity. Some places we're saying, hey, this is a smaller area, only 1 person's there. But in the larger metros, it's open, and the reason is because again, like in the past, like 5 years ago, you could go find a really cool list and maybe you'd be the only person at the table. We did that. We used to do we'd cross stuff. So we'd take all our vacancies, we'd cross it with foreclosure, and we'd cross it with deceased, right? So we'd put all this together, and I'd give it to my guys and say, hey, go find these people, and they'd go hunt them. And they'd a lot of times be the only people at the table. I mean, we were sticking like $100,000, $98,000 wholesales because we were the only person at the table. That's just not happening today. The environment's changed. You're going to have competition. And so the best thing that we can do, our biggest goal, like Stephen mentioned, is, like we're trying to help you focus on who you do need to talk to so that you can win the deal at the table. Because that's the challenge right now. And, I say this all the time, we make Jordans, that doesn't make you Jordan. I think you guys are all in 7-figure flippers to get better at operations and to get better at winning that fight that you guys are all gonna have to fight in today's market. Do you guys like, this guy came out here, hold on. What are you gonna do with the members who are already with you?
That's between me and you.
I'll do the same thing then.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure. So I know you're gonna get this one. So.
Yeah, we can do that. Yeah, so if you're already with this,
yeah, like I'm reading lips here.
Yeah. Somebody had asked, do we work with the Net Worths and New West? Curious to be getting the same data. So unless somebody actually publicly discloses they work on our client base, I can tell you that, we work with a lot of different people, including even some lenders. And so, but like I said, nobody gets the same exact set. We build everything specific to that person. And you'd be shocked how little overlap there can be even in some cities, just because people are doing different things. Guys that are buying infill are doing a different thing than guys that are buying wholesale. It's just a different product. And so you're definitely gonna have crossover no matter what, by the way. Like people are like, well, am I gonna cross over? Dude, you're gonna cross over. Like if they have equity and they've lived there for a long time, like there's certain people that we're gonna mail until they die and beyond. And guess what? So is everybody else. Like if you're an out-of-state owner with a ton of equity and you're old and you have 1 rental, like you're gonna get hit by everybody no matter what. Our job is to make sure that you're not, wasting money. So, somebody asked if they want to use us to inform them how many others are paying for the list in their market. Like I said, we don't disclose who our clients are unless they share that. But yeah, that's just how that works. Yeah, how many? Yeah, I'll tell you how many are there. Do you limit your data to 25K names? Yeah, so the product that we have right now is set up and it's done. So we actually have what we call mini markets. So if you want less than 25,000 names, you can get that. And it goes down pro rata in smaller markets. We start out with 25,000 targets. A lot of times, typically we work with people that are already at scale. If you're not going to do, if you're not scaling, if you're not, going to do any kind of volume, like if your ad budget is less than like 7,000 or 8,000 a month, there's probably, you should probably go with a specialty set, not with us, because, our value is to help people scale efficiently. Let's see.
Sound like more of an operational question. So Randall did a follow-up with that and said he would want more names than 25,000. So is that,
Yeah, totally. Yeah, we have people that have, we had somebody that started at 40,000 and we took them to 400,000. So scale is our thing. And that was over the course of 4 years.
I'm going to try to answer Tyler's question. It said, how can we compete with someone in our market that uses your list? And we're trying to use your list too. Or are you saying how to compete if you're not using Chris's list and someone is? Is that the question?
Let me ask you a question. Like, if you buy a list from ListSource, do you think you're competing with anybody?
No, I get what he's asking, because I know where Tyler is. Tyler's in Salt Lake, and so is Andy. So he's kind of saying, like, how do I compete?
Oh, I see what you're saying, dude.
I think you compete with, you just be the guy who shows up. So I talk about this all the time as far as the operational side, right? If there's people in my market that do 1 or 2 deals a month and they beat us to deals. And the way that they do that is they're the small guy, right? So running a big company with 18 people trying to go on, do 20, 30 deals a month, I'm trying to be like the small guy all the time in a big operation. Like, I want to answer the phone right when it rings, and I want to get out there at dinner time when they're ready to show us the house that day. It's really hard from a company that takes a phone call, passes it off to an acquisitions person who has to make sure that their schedule is clear, make sure they have the time to go out there, then they have to get the message, then they go out there. So the one-off wholesaler, the guy who's a one-man show, and he can beat us to deals all the time. So I always tell you guys, if you're not at scale yet and it's just you or it's you and like 2 other people, I always tell my people in my company, we got to try to think like the little guy. We got to be the little guy operationally, but be efficient in a larger scale group. So that's how you beat people. That's how you beat me to a deal in my market. You get out there as fast as possible. I remember when it was just me, I get a call at 4 o'clock and we're sitting down for dinner. And I'm like, hey, honey, I got to go. And I would go out to see that house and I'd be the first one there. And he's like, I got 2 or 3 more people coming tomorrow. I was like, look, are they here at dinner time with you right now? Let's sit down and talk about it. Are they going to do anything different than I'm doing? What do you think they do? So you've got to you got to run your operation tight, be better in sales, be better to the deal, be operationally tight. And if you are, then you'll beat the big guy and you'll beat the small guy, right? Because then you say, how do I beat the small guy? Because I'm a big guy. Well, then you blast them with how many testimonials you have, how many houses have you done in that city, your reputation, how likely are you to close? Here, look at my bank account statement. Here it is, got $500,000 in it. Can anybody else show you that? So there's ways to be the little guy and the big guy, and we teach that in this group. We're a community of that. We're all at different levels. So, I wouldn't care. I honestly don't care. Like, I don't care if somebody's using Chris or somebody's using their own list. I'm going to beat you at your game with what I do best. And I'm going to own as much as my market at every market that I'm in as I can. And I'm going to try to dominate the best way I know how. So that's my push to you guys. I know, like, I'm going to get off my soapbox now and let Chris take it. But like, I don't care. I don't care what other people are doing. I want to know what I'm doing. And I want to make sure that I'm doing everything that I do to get as many deals as I can that are put in front of me. What we're talking about here is how do we become a little more efficient? How do we get in front of the right people? How do we make sure that we're not wasting money? I talk about, just leaking money all the time, right? So, if the purchase of this list makes us mail half the amount to get the same amount of deals, to me, it's like, man, this is crazy. So just another kind of, remember, this is just a concept, right? Chris came on, he showed you what he does. I've got a couple questions that I want to ask him, but remember, it's not going to be for everybody. And I know that he's going to say, well, you're going to waste your money by not buying this list, right? Like, this list will pay for itself. And I get it. And
I'm never like telling people not to do it. Like, if what you're doing is working, like, who am I?
Yeah, I know, but like even I came on this call like we don't use you right now, right? But there's a couple reasons why two of our three markets currently aren't available, right? So to me, it's like I don't know if we're already doing it, but it's making me scratch my head and think about it a little more in depth now. Hearing you, meeting you, looking at this, and talking to you the past couple months, it's different than what I thought. That's why I wanted to bring Chris on and let you guys hear him and talk to him, and like really ask ourselves, like get to know him, understand what they're doing, and see if it's an option for you. I'm not bringing them on here to say everybody in our group should be buying this list. What I'm saying is, let me give you an option. Let me figure out if it's for you. You guys try it out, see what it's like. Get to know Chris. Realize he's a good guy. He loves this stuff. This is like what he eats. And I mean, he made like 3 nerd jokes of statistics, like who's drowning in 3 feet of the water. Let me average this out. It's kind of funny. There might be like 4 engineers that I know that would have laughed at that if you didn't. So. But like you get kind of who he is and what he's doing. So I don't know. There's a couple more questions. I got one for you before we go, but
okay. Let's see. Like James had written about a market. Yeah, just hook up with Doug, dude. He'll get you hooked up. So for what it's worth, like Doug Williams is our account manager. He takes care of our licensing all over the country. So if you ever call, you'll probably actually talk to Doug and not me. But he's who you want to talk to because he actually knows what's going on.
The next, I'll help you here. Rod asked, are most people doing direct mail with your list, or they also skip tracing and calling, texting? That's a great question. Do you guys provide phone numbers or emails?
Yeah. So, I mentioned this and I talk about it in the predictive modeling video, but, I think that a lot of people think about our stuff from mail because, historically, or at least over the past 5 years, like that's been a very big thing, direct mail, and it still is a big thing. Like, most people do direct mail, but yeah, in a lot of markets, especially like more competitive markets, people are running call centers. In the bigger, more competitive markets, calling has become pretty normal because the direct mail. I don't think I sent this to you guys, but like there was an article in the paper the other day that was here, and it was just a picture of, it said, "Stop mailing me." And there was a picture of somebody's countertop, and they had a stack of mail like this high. And it was all these postcards and letters, and they were, exactly what you do. They were like, how do I? And so, that puts the seller in a pretty good position. But, there's just a ton of mail. And so, even if they are a good seller, it's so competitive. A lot of people have taken our stuff and now, instead of just mailing it, they're enriching with phones. Sometimes it's through us. We do have a phone service. It's a separate product, but we do have a phone enrichment. Sometimes they'll use like a TLO or an AccuRent or what's the other one? IRR, something like that. But they're enriching with phones and dialing, and it's working. Some are doing like a digital enrichment, so they'll go through and like take the set and use it to build out digital campaigns. So yeah, it really depends on your market. I mean, if you're in a less competitive market, a lot of times direct mail works great. If you're in Phoenix or San Diego or Miami or DC or something like that, you're in let's throw all of California in there. You're in a different environment for sure.
Okay, hey, the question I have here, make sure I'm not on mute yet. So there might be some people that there's currently somebody in it that has exclusivity in their market or something like that, or this is not something they're ready to make that next step on as far as price goes. Like, what would you recommend to some of those guys? Like, I know I sent my video to you pretty late yesterday, so I'm sure you didn't get to watch it. But would you say to them, kind of like, go do what they're doing from the source wise until they're ready, or is there anything like take some of this stuff, some of these ideas I really like I look at that buyer set and then I map it, and then I look and see how many of those buyers are hedge funds and things like that probably aren't buying from us. Try to figure out, but it's all me guessing, like you said, like who was buying off the MLS and who was buying from wholesalers. Like, what do the areas look like? It's that more geographical than than just like being really broad as far as buyers go. So
Yeah, I mean, I think that I did a thing about zip codes one time, and so geography is interesting because geography is it's fine. The boundaries are fine, but a lot of times there's a lot of difference inside of zip codes, and a zip code's kind of like this arbitrary boundary that was created by the government so that so that mail guys could walk on a clear route, right? It has, but that said, it's not that it's not meaningful. It certainly is, because you typically have a more homogeneous population inside of a zip code. It's even a little bit more clean cut if you go inside of neighborhoods or zip fours. And so, yeah, if I don't, for what it's worth, Bill, like I saw that and I saw it late and I didn't get to watch it. I will watch it because it's interesting to me. But I don't think there's anything wrong with what most people are doing. Like there's nothing wrong with, just using industry knowledge to create a list. It's just that industry knowledge plus quantitative data gets you an optimum result. And that adds up. If you're, for the average person, if your response rate went from 0.7/10 of 1% to 0.9 of 1%, that 0.2 of 1% is about $300,000 a year for most people. So those little numbers add up really fast. That said, for people that are saying that they say, hey, I'm just getting started, I want to go spend $3,000 on a set. There's nothing wrong with that at all. Like that if you're spending a little bit less on the front, you're going to test something, you're going to learn something. I think that the difference for the people that choose to come to us is that they're saying, well, I'm looking at it as a year from now, and saying a year from now, would I have rather spent 3,000 and made 500, or would I have rather spent the 15 and made 1.5? But not everybody's in a position to do that. Not everybody should do that. To your point, like not everybody should do that. And I think I like I like getting weird in list source. I don't think there's anything wrong with doing that. I think it's great. You can have a lot of success out of that. I always like if anybody that asked me, I'd say the first thing I would do if you're just starting and you're just going to do a small set is go down to the county, pull all the probates, code bios, sewer liens, POAs that are not associated with a refi, that kind of stuff, and so. Everybody's asking like.
Yeah, now it's mostly about price.
So Randall asked about the phone email. So we do have phones. It's a separate charge. We charge like 6 cents a line, I think, for phones. So.
Okay, so yeah, the next like 4 questions are about like how much is it. So I think you guys were at like 15 or 15.5 or 15.8 or something. Does that sound right?
Yeah, it was 14.8 per annually.
Okay, so
like a little over 1,000 a month, I think, but it was charged by annual. So
yeah, so Chris and I talked, and which I'm trying to see how we can get like the best deal for you guys if you want to come in. So we went back and forth a little bit and just kind of talked about and really the question when we got down to the number, I said, can anybody get this like outside of here? Can they call you up and get this? And he's like, no, I want to give you guys something. So so I thought it was really cool. And it was nice. I mean, this is really what I put my time into, is spending time developing these relationships, talking to people, and really saying, hey, can we get some value here and save some money? Because I want you guys to save, like I told you, I want your entry fee to be paid the day that you join, and your renewal to be a no-brainer to stay with us. So so Chris agreed to make the price $13.3 for us. So a pretty good savings, a little over $1,000 to come in. And so $1,500? Sorry, yeah, $1,500. So I don't want to diss. He's like, yeah, don't sell me short here. So yeah, so $13.3 pretty good. $1,500 is probably just a small piece of the membership that combined with all the other stuff that we bring. For you, Brandon, in Nashville, that's monthly. For everybody else, it's annually. So he's in my market too.
Yeah, I'm
actually in his now. So So yeah, that's the annual price of the list. But then, remember, you still got some mail and everything like that. So can you give into some details? Let's say like I sign up with you now, Chris. One thing I think we didn't cover, and I don't want to go any more than 12:30 here, but or another 9 minutes or so. But if we sign up with you, like, does the list come every month? Is it once a year? Those things. Does that include whatever number that we want? Is there a limit? Like a couple details of going into that as far as price and what we get.
Sure. So really, we have that pricing is for a full region, which we consider to be 25,000 targets. So we'll say, okay, we'll choose a geographic region. It's generally about 500,000 people, maybe more. Certainly not more than 1 million, because you need more targets to do that. So we try to, get people into geographically contiguous areas. And then we say, one full region is 25,000 targets per quarter. And so we update it every 90 days. We're actually updating it every month. It's being updated, it's being tested, all that kind of stuff. But when we give you a data set, we want you to hit it for 90 days. And there's, the next quarter, you're going to get a new set. You take it and replace the old one. That said, there's going to be overlap in there, as there should be. If there was an overlap, that should scare you, because it would mean that we're, everything's changing. It's definitely not. So, but we're updating it every 90 days, and we're keeping it completely optimized so that at the end of the day, you guys can focus on going and doing your job, knowing that you have a completely optimized data set and that you're talking to the right people, and focus your attention on the operational fight, which you're certainly going to have to fight these days. So
what do you recommend as far as that goes? Like, we get a list every quarter. Do you recommend throwing out the one that you sent us 90 days ago and then just mail the new one only?
Yep.
Okay. And then hit those people. I guess it's kind of up to us. Send return mail to you guys.
Not send us your return mail. I don't want it. I would actually take those people and hunt them. If you're getting return mail, that's probably the best thing that could happen for your business.
So that leads me to a question. Do you guys actually run that data through some of these undeliverables, USPS, or just leave that to the mail house? So like, you guys just pull the information and send it.
We have a cache, so we know if people are undeliverable, and we'll flag them if they're. We'll put a flag, and sometimes we didn't post this, but we'll send you stuff. That's gonna you'll see a vacant flag, and then a vacancy, and then non-deliverable. So, we have CAS, and so we do that in-house. People that are, we have a lot of users that are having success because the stuff that bounces back, somebody's house, if their mailing address is vacant, that means that nobody else is talking to them. And so they'll take that stuff, they'll put it in a pile, they'll scan it or whatever, send it off to a VA, and then skip trace them all, and then find them.
Yeah.
Really, really good list.
Okay, and then so what if they want to get going? What do they want? What should they do? Like, how can they reach out to you or Doug, or who should they talk to?
Yeah, so I just put that on here. You can, if you email me, Chris at Audantic, what I'll do is I'll make an introduction to Doug, and he can walk you guys through how it works, what regions are available, what's open. If you want information, we're always more than happy to just talk about how it works. And the size of regions. If you're in a smaller market, like we have some people that are in markets that are like 300,000 people. And by the way, secondary markets work way better than big markets. But the guys that are in smaller markets are just because they're just less competitive. So the pricing scales depending on how large your market is. But if you just send me an email, I'll make an introduction to Doug, and you guys can talk through anything. And if there's anything really weird that you want to talk about, I'll hop onto and get weird.
What's the like an idea of the cost for phone number? Oh, you said it's just 6 cents a name. So if we want 25,000 names, skip trace, it's 6 cents per name on that list.
Yeah.
Is that right?
And ours isn't, for what it's worth, like ours isn't a skip trace, it's an enrichment. And I always make that differentiation because like TLO and Accurant are actual like skip trace generally. Our stuff is a lot cheaper than theirs. Quite frankly, it's not as good. I would say that, we're getting about 80% of the way there, 70% of the way there, with, like a fifth of the cost.
And does it come with, is it just one phone number for each record? Or
just one phone, the best phone.
Okay. And then it could be mobile or landline?
Yeah, it gets tagged, yeah.
Okay.
Hey, Chris, I got a quick question. So you guys have that product to find the buyers as well, right? I know you kind of
Yeah, we have Flip and Tell.
flip and tell. That was the name. How much is that?
That's 1,500 a year per state. And
Okay.
what that does, like I can send you guys a video because everybody's asked about this. So I can send you a video that kind of details what it is and how it works. But that's just a product that was actually built for hard money lenders. And so you can look at your market, and it shows you every property that was exited at a profit, where somebody had actually exited a flip. It shows you how many flips they did, how much they made when they did them. You can click on their name. So I could click on Will Kim, and I'd see every deal that you did, how much you made when you bought it, when you sold it, who you borrowed money from, all of that kind of stuff.
Would that be a good way to actually build a buyer's list?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So I know Chris and I have talked about this, and I'm really trying to push him to get something that I think would be really good for wholesalers, to see kind of that middleman, right? That middleman is lost. It's the end buyer and the front buyer. I think it's all good. So I'm just going to keep pushing Chris to work on that and get it to us, because
we're working on it. For what it's worth, like we kind of have something like that internally now, but there's a big difference between something that we would use internally and what's actually a product. Putting something out there that anybody's going to feel comfortable using is way more. It's a different thing.
So I gotta look at that at the Baltimore meeting, and I thought it was awesome. And then I talked to Chris, and like as a wholesaler, there's a little bit more that I wanted, but I think it's a great product. And the really cool thing is the lenders. Like I have a lender in there. That's like gold for us, right? Trying to find other lenders, private mortgages, raise some capital, stuff like that. So it's another really cool product. So
it's been neat because you can see who's going to pay the most. And so if you're in a market and you get a contract, especially if you're new and you don't know a lot of buyers, you can immediately look at all of the buyers in the area. You can see who the biggest are, who's buying in that specific zip code. And you can say, well, Kyle pays 80 cents on the dollar and Steve only pays 70. I'm going to go to Kyle. And you're going to make an extra 5-10 grand just from having that piece of information. So.
Yeah, good stuff. All right, Randall, I'm just going to say, if you want to talk to Chris about like how many names and let him run your data, the size of your market and stuff like that, let's do that. Because he's just asking about price over 25. I think it's probably better like a one-on-one conversation to see how big your market is and what.
Yeah, just hit us up, Randall. We can more than happy to talk about that stuff.
Because the cool thing I thought was when I talked to him, he said like, "Hey, I need to look at the market. I need to even tell you, should you even be mailing 25,000 or should you be mailing 20 or 15?" Right. Exactly. Honestly, most people are going to say, "Yeah, I'll sell you 25,000 names." And I thought it was really cool. Instead of doing that, what they're really trying to do is increase our efficiency from the number of names. So
we had a guy in North Carolina that we cut down. Like he was one of our first clients, and he was doing like 70,000 pieces. And we looked at it, and I was like, "Dude, you need to be doing like 40,000 pieces and reallocate that spend." And he flipped out. Like we cut his set from 70 something down to 40, and like he went berserk. And the thing is that he ended up getting the same number of deals that he was getting with his 70, and we were saving him 13 grand a month. And so
that's $120,000 a year for my cost of my mail. So it's pretty. That would be pretty good, especially if we get the same amount of deals. So, well, hey, everybody, thanks for coming on. Any last minute things, Chris? Good.
Thank you guys for having me here. More than happy to talk to anybody about what we do. Please reach out if you have questions. If you want a question like what we're doing, how we're doing it, just want to understand more. We're into that.
So I think the big thing here is, this is an opportunity for you guys. Obviously, like last week on Thursday, I just did an exact call of exactly what he was bashing this entire call, and I feel okay with it. Like I understand what I'm doing as far as it's not predictive modeling, but it's totally understandable. And we're doing a couple $1 million from it per year, so it's doable, and we scaled it. But now I'm starting to scratch my head trying to figure out how we can be more efficient. And so this was a little bit, something I wanted to hear too. So. A little selfish, but I think it's good for everyone. So, Chris, thanks for coming on. And if you're not there yet, and this is not something that you want to do, then get with me or watch the video that we did last week. And I think that's probably, you're going to be your most effective way to try to, I don't know, hit the golf ball without looking at the.
Yeah, I mean, the information's free. So if all it does is give you something to chew on, then that's, we've done what we're supposed to do.
Yeah, exactly. And I feel like I try to use as much of this stuff with as little amount of data. I try to get as much data as I can, just being an engineer and a nerd, and trying to like work my list down and try to see how we can be more efficient on our own. But I mean, frankly, we've hired a ton of consultants, and we just hired one to come in and doubled our gross profit for the this quarter. So, I mean, I see it. It happens. I'll be the first one to say that I'm wrong and I'm not doing everything right. So, anyway, thanks for joining us, Chris. Thanks for
you guys. I appreciate you guys coming on and talking with us. So.
All right, guys. See you. We'll put this video up. See you.
Take care, guys.
Bye, Chris.